Two women went on a hike one day and never returned. But that's not even the scariest part of this story. The evidence that followed their disappearance will haunt you. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened, and it's likely we never will. Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if it's your first time here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things, so if that's also your thing, consider subscribing. Today we're going to talk about the disappearance of Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers. In case you don't know the story, I'm going to go over step by step everything that we know, and then I'm going to talk about different theories, including what I think happened. Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers were two Dutch friends, 22 and 21 respectively. They saved up for the better part of 6 months in order to take this 6-week trip to Panama together. It was Froon's graduation present to herself. They also wanted to learn Spanish and volunteer for the local children. They arrived in Panama on March 15th, 2014. The next 2 weeks, they do regular touristy things. They explore the area, they go swimming, all that kind of stuff. Then on March 29th, they move in with a local host family for the remaining month that they're there. As it turns out, the school that they were going to volunteer for the children with let them know that they were actually a week early and they got the time wrong. So then they had these extra few days to explore this foreign land. On the morning of April 1st, they post on Facebook about how they're about to take a hike. They also post about having brunch with a couple of Dutch men the morning of their hike. Others say they didn't post that part on Facebook, but that they were just seen with the Dutch men the morning of the hike. It has not been confirmed. They take one of the local dogs with them, and it was either the host family's or perhaps the brunch restaurant owner's dog. They head off to the Pianista Trails, not far from Buquete where they were staying. So on April 1st, they left late in the morning. And then that night, the dog shows up back in town without the girls. The host family hears of this and thinks it's weird, but they didn't exactly know the girls' full plans, so they figured they were just still out. They didn't know if they were staying overnight or what they were doing. And then the next day, they had an appointment with a local tour guide, and of course, they missed it. 7 more days go by, and no one has seen or heard from the girls. They actually didn't even report them missing until a couple days later because, again, they didn't really know their plans. The locals started searching for them, and finally on April 6th, 5 days after they first left, their parents are called. Their parents immediately fly down from the Netherlands and they show up with a bunch of police. With the police and the parents, they start searching for the girls over the next 10 days, starting where they were last seen. No one finds any trace of them. Cut to about 10 weeks later, a local woman turns in a blue backpack that she found. The backpack belonged to Lisanne. The weirdest and creepiest part is that all their stuff was still in this backpack, folded, dry, and in clean and good condition. They also found the women's phones, and they also found a camera. The local woman who had turned in the backpack also swore up and down that it was not there the day before. The backpack was also quite a ways from where the girls were last seen. First, let's talk about their phone records. The phone records showed that they were calling emergency numbers over and over. They called the international phone number, which was 112, and they also called the local Panama phone number, which was 911. These calls started only a few hours after they had left. They don't have reception, so none of the calls go through except for one on April 3rd, which is picked up for only a second before dropped again due to the bad reception. Overall, they believe that their phones made 77 attempts to call for help. After April 5th, 4 days after they left, Lisanne's phone goes dead, and it was not used again. Kris's phone was also not used anymore, but only turned on every now and then to try to search for signal. On April 6th, 5 days after they left, multiple attempts were made on Kris's phone to put in the PIN number. The attempts failed. So this tells us that it most likely was not Kris trying to get into her own phone, but someone else, either Lisanne or who knows. Then on April 11th, 10 days after they set out for their hike, the phone is turned on and off again for the last time. Now let's get to the camera. Lisanne had a camera that was found as well. On April 1st, they found the first couple hours they had taken photos of each other, happy on their hike and just exploring where they were on the trail. Then there's no photos again taken until April 8th, which was a full 7 days after they left. And then they find over 90 flash photos taken on the camera, all of the jungle and none of the girls. They also found that there was a missing photo. The camera seems to skip to number 508 to 510. 508 is the last photo of the girls on the first day when they were happy. And then it skips to 510, the first dark photo, the flash one they took on the 8th. 509 is missing. There's a lot of theories as to why that is. They thought maybe if it was foul play, it was somebody who had deleted that photo because they managed to snap a picture of them and they didn't want to incriminate themselves. People also figured if they had been starving and thirsty for 7 days, why would they bother going into the camera and deleting one random photo? So a lot of people also speculate that's why it was somebody else. They found photos of candy wrappers as well as a photo of toilet paper and a mirror on a rock. And there's also many theories as to this, but some think that maybe they were trying to mark their place to see if they were going in circles so they could figure out if they had already been there before. I also think that's the most likely scenario. Then there's this photo of the side of some sort of giant rock. A lot of people think that it's a photo looking down a cliff. Others speculate that it's actually the opposite and it's actually a photo of somebody at the bottom of a cliff taking a picture up, and that the foliage on this rock is actually the undersides of the leaves. So that's the backpack, and that's the only sign they've seen so far. Then shortly after the backpack, they find Kris's shorts, folded and zipped up neatly on a rock. Again, the reports on this case vary depending on the source you read. Some reports say that the shorts were found hours and hours walking distance away from where the girls were last seen. The report says that they were zipped up and neatly folded, but then some other witnesses have come along and said that they were actually found in the river. So again, there's a lot of discrepancies. Shortly after they found the shorts, they found a pelvis bone, and then they found a boot with a foot still in it. They found these near where the backpack was found. Then they found 33 more bone fragments scattered around this area. The pelvis bone belonged to Kris, and it actually looks like it had been bleached. The foot in the boot belonged to Lisanne. A forensic anthropologist, when analyzing the bones, said that he couldn't find any scrapes or marks on them. So to this day, we don't know a lot more than that. Again, pretty much every source you read about these girls is different or differentiates just a little bit on these random details, so it's hard to know exactly which fact is the right fact and the one in the actual reports. So now let's talk about the theories. Obviously, there is two most likely theories. They were either murdered in the jungle or they died from exposure to the elements. Let's talk about people that think they were murdered. If this is the case, then somebody knew where they were going and must have followed them onto the trail. The girls say got a photo of this person because they saw somebody else out there, and maybe they were running away and trying to call for help while they were running away from this person. But the person caught them, and right after they were trying to call for help, ended up killing them, and they had actually been dead since April 1st, the day they left. This person then deleted that one photo that incriminated them. The person then kept Lisanne and Kris's things and then started making the emergency calls in order to make it seem like they had still been alive. And then the one emergency call that actually did go through, this person hung up very quickly because they didn't actually want to get through. Then they keep returning to the scene of the crime days later, starting to take the flash photos to make it seem like the girls had been lost, got off the trail, and were starting to take all these pictures again, just to make it look like it was the girls doing these things. So if it was this, it would explain several things. It would explain why neither of the girls were in any of those 90 flash photos because they were already dead. The fact that the backpack was in good condition and everything everything was clean. This means that the person that killed them had the backpack all along and finally just dumped it somewhere for somewhere to find. Again, explaining why the backpack was not there one day and then all of a sudden appeared, according to that one witness. And then if this were the case, it was probably the two Dutch boys that they had brunch with, or even possibly the tour guide that they missed the appointment with. It would explain why their bones were scattered everywhere. It would mean somebody dismembered them. And then the biggest reason a lot of people think this is that many people have gone missing in this area or killed, especially tourists, since this happened. So some people actually think it's a serial killer. A couple years later, in February 2017, a 23-year-old woman named Catherine goes missing, and it is found she was hiking around the same area alone and she was strangled to death. I also found this really heartbreaking video showing Kris Kremers' parents going with the tour guide in the daytime, and they tried to retrace the girl's steps. They went through this same path that they did, and their conclusions were basically that it would be extremely hard to get lost. They thought they know their daughter, she's really smart. If they got lost, they would have turned around. They would not have left the trail, and even if they had, they would have just gone back the other way. They said their impression of the trail is that you would actually have to try to get lost there. So it seems to be that whether it was a murder or some other type of conspiracy, the parents don't seem to truly believe that their death was an accident. To me, the theory that they got murdered just doesn't seem likely. I have several reasons to believe this. If someone had killed them, I don't know why they'd go through so much trouble trying to cover it up for 10 days after the fact. And the 23-year-old girl that was strangled, her body was just left around. Nobody put any effort into covering it up, so the MOs don't match whatsoever, so I don't think it was the same person. They didn't have any witnesses, so why would they just leave their bodies there in the jungle? Additionally, so many days after, somebody was trying to get into Kris's phone but failed and didn't have the right PIN number. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense if he had killed the girls the first day, was able to use their phones a ton, and then wasn't able to get in much later. He obviously would not have kept the phones on because they would have died long before that. So I don't see how a murderer would be able to get into the phones for days and then suddenly not be able to and attempt the PIN number on Kris's phones. Those parts don't match up. The second biggest theory is that they died from exposure to the elements or some sort of injury, accident, or a combination. This is what I personally think is the most likely scenario. Again, this is speculation at best. Just from all the research I've done, there's still many more theories out there. And as I've said now several times, it's really hard to know exactly what happened in this case because there's so many different reports. A lot of people talk about how there's a monkey bridge on this trail. If you don't know what that is, I'll show a picture here, but it's kind of like a string that you walk across holding on to two other strings above your head to balance. Many say that they were crossing the monkey bridge. Lisanne had, I believe, already crossed, and then when Kris was crossing, she fell and she hurt herself and landed in the river or by the river. I think she got severely injured, but I think that she was still able to walk. Lisanne helped her up and they tried to walk as far as they could, calling for help over and over. Again, this is just the first day and Kris has an accident. They knew they wouldn't be able to walk all the way back out on their own as they were already hours in. They wouldn't be able to walk back since Kris was so injured, so they knew they needed help getting out. I think perhaps it was starting to get dark and they were just panicked that they couldn't get any help, and so they either strayed off the trail or they took a wrong turn and ended up getting lost. The reason I think they got lost is because the trail is so straightforward, as we saw in the video, that I think they would have found the girls much quicker when they started searching if they were on the path. So I think one way or another, the girls got off the trail. Kris gets really weak, and so Lisanne has to leave her and try to find help on her own. She goes off, continuing to call emergency numbers, and perhaps they were even separated for a couple of days, and they're both trying to call from their respective places. As we know, Lisanne's phone died on April 5th, and so she probably returned to Kris now that she didn't have a phone. However, upon returning to Kris, she found out that Kris had either passed away from her injuries and a lack of food and water, or she was at least passed out and unresponsive. Since her phone is dead, Lisanne panics and tries to use Kris's phone, but since Kris is unresponsive, she doesn't know the PIN, so she tries to get in and she can't. She stays near Kris for the next couple of days until April 8th, which is the day they started getting the photos. I think she was with Kris until the middle of the night because the photos were all taken between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. So I believe that either an animal started coming after them and Lisanne started to run because the animal attacked Kris, or something else just startled her. Something happened that made Lisanne start to run or walk very quickly in the middle of the night. And then Lisanne started leaving these markers for herself, the candy wrappers and the toilet paper, to see if she can hopefully know where she was, if she can make it until the morning. If there was in fact no foul play involved, then we know that at least Lisanne survived for another few days, since the phone was turned on and off for the last time on April 11th. Which was a full 10 days after they left. This is also why some people say they were murdered, because it would be extremely unlikely to last that long alive on your own without adequate food and water. To me, I think you can go a long time without food, and I believe that we see in the photos that it's frequently raining and it's the jungle, so I believe that she was drinking the rainwater. Lisanne falls and breaks her ankle. This would explain why her foot is still in the shoe. And then basically she also dies from exposure to the elements and the inability to walk. And then animals, unfortunately, took care of the rest. That is what I personally believe happened. I think when you're in a really, really unfamiliar area in the jungle, it's completely possible and most likely that it was just extremely bad luck. There is one more theory that, there's other theories out there and other variations of the theories I went over. One more that I do want to point out is that some people do think this was an entire conspiracy. The conspiracy theory is that there was foul play involved and the two girls were murdered. The Panama government actually knew this from the start and had found evidence that they were murdered, but they tried to cover it up. They tried to cover it up because if they had murders going around, they knew that this would deter tourists from coming to Panama. And tourism is a very big part of the Panama economy. So at least if it was just an accident where they could just blame the girls for what happened to them, then it would be way less sinister than a murderer running around where tourists would stop coming altogether. This is supported by the fact that there's so many different variations of the story. A lot of people say that the police investigation was terrible, basically botched, that there was no good police investigation at all, and there was a lot of mishaps during the search and the collection of evidence. For example, the backpack had a lot of different fingerprints on it, and they did not determine very well if the fingerprints just belonged to the witness who found the backpack, police officers who had touched the backpack, along with possible other people if it wasn't Lisanne's or Kris's fingerprints. And then along with the fact that many other tourists have died in the area since then and often found murdered or just missing. So they think maybe this is a common theme in this area of Panama, but the Panama government does not want tourists to know about it. To me, this seems like a reach. It just seems less likely than a really tragic accident, but I don't think it can be ruled out because I do think there was a lot of problems with the investigation, and so I do wish there was way more solid proof of a play-by-play of exactly what they know. This is one of the most tragic stories and weirdest, creepiest disappearances, I think, of all time. But it's really hard to nail down exactly what happened, which I think is why it's such a mystery. So please let me know what you think in the comments below. I would really be interested in hearing anybody else's theories on this. So I think that's going to be it for today. This video has gone on long enough. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end, and I will see everyone in the next one.